the Regnier Institute's first Wednesday. Fun fact, on the second Wednesday of February for the spring semester. So this is our first Wednesday event of the spring semester. We have an outstanding lineup of speakers for the rest of the semester, including tonight. We'll introduce you to our speaker in a little bit. First, I want to do a little bit of a commercial. So we have, in the Regnier Institute, every spring we host an outstanding opportunity for student entrepreneurs to test their ideas, and if they have potential to the ideas, the opportunity to compete for $70,000 in prizes to help them launch their ventures. So I'm going to make the assumption that anybody in this room could use cash prizes to help them launch their venture if you have a venture idea. So what I want you to remember about this competition is have an idea. The competition this year is on May 1st, so that's the first thing to remember. The next thing to remember is if you go to tinyurl.com/RVCC2020-compete, sign up there and let us know you're planning to compete. And one of our speakers for next month, Brian Shannon, he is a graduate of our eScholars program. He also did outstanding in the Venture Creation Challenge several years back. And it was about a year ago right now that he sold the business that he started when he was an eScholar here at UMKC. And so speaking of eScholars, I'm going to pass it off to Alex Matlack. Alex leads our eScholars program here at UMKC, and she's going to introduce us to our guest speaker for this evening.
Okay, guys, we have a special treat. So, as most of you know who have seen me talk before, if you're in my classes, before this I worked for Techstars, which is a really great accelerator, consistently ranked among the top 3 in the world, and one of the first accelerators in the world. Y Combinator and Techstars both started in 2007. So, Lesa Mitchell was my partner there, and before that she was in Silicon Valley working with companies, was the VP of entrepreneurship, innovation and entrepreneurship at Kauffman Foundation for 10 years before that, and started off working for Marion Labs, which was Ewing Kauffman's company. But Lesa is really, really well known, not even just in Kansas City, but everywhere, and respected for the way that she's been able to mentor companies. And I think every single time I meet somebody who has met Lesa, they are just so excited that I've gotten a chance to work with her, and I think are very jealous of me because of that. So she's got a lot of wisdom to share, so I'll turn it over to her. I won't steal any more of the rest of what she's going to talk about. So Lesa, please get us started.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. And Alex is amazing, so you should spend more time with her. I was so thankful to work with Alex because I'm really bad at staying on time and details and keeping track of all of the technology stuff that we want to do with our companies, what we want to teach them, etc. And she's amazing at all of those things and built a great culture with all of our companies as well. So I'm super thankful for her all the time. And she is the reason that we are going to be operating Techstars out of UMKC this summer. So, of course, I'm really, really excited about that. We will be operating right here on the 3rd floor, which is crazy. And, oh, I need a clicker. And awesome. So what I'm going to do is talk, and I'm super informal, so I don't care if anybody stops me at any point in time. What I'm going to do is go the wrong way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk about Techstars. And hopefully you'll see how those two things weave in together. And why I think Techstars is important to operate here, what we're trying to accomplish, etc. So let me start with a little bit about me. And my comment here, there's no straight lines, means, most people that I know, if you ask them why or how they're doing what they're doing today, it's a very confusing story. And I am no exception to that very confusing story. I started my career at 9300 Ward Parkway. I don't know what's there now, but a long time ago, working for Mr. Kaufman's company, which I'm sure no one here probably knows what that is. Does anyone know what that is, Mr. Kaufman's company? Nope. Okay. Oh, one person, two people. And we were growing. We were hiring about 300 people a month. And like, so seriously, thousands of people a year. And I came in kind of late in the growth cycle of the company and was hired into an executive development program, which means you go around and work in all sorts of different departments to kind of figure out where you're going to be good at. And ended up in what they called at the time organizational development, which was intended, I think now people kind of think about it as systems theory. Who was that system theory guy? Is he not here? No, he's going to miss this. Anyway, and the goal was to try to figure out structural alignment, compensation alignment, all of those kinds of things for the research and development arm of the company. And it was a pharmaceutical company, so research and development is kind of important. I went from there, and that was a long time. I ran an M&A group, meaning after we did mergers with other big pharmaceutical companies, I was the person in charge of figuring out how to do that post-merger integration, and it was really horrible, and I did it in like 5 different countries, and it's like the worst job ever, but it sounds really cool. And so that's why I kept getting sucked into doing it, because everybody told me this is like the best experience ever. And so I would just keep doing it until practically I almost died. And at that point, we sold the company in Kansas City to a company in North Carolina. I went to work for the CEO there, still living here in Kansas City. So I was attracted to things that made me travel far places for an everyday job. And hated it so much that I quit my job and said, I can do what I'm doing for you guys myself. And so that was the first time I became an entrepreneur. But I was really stupid about becoming an entrepreneur because what I was wanting to do was a kind of a company that had never happened before. And all of my customers ended up being in India and South Africa, which was like, again, long distance. I don't know how I'm attracted to these things. But it was my first entrepreneurial experience, and it was amazing. And the reason it was a good idea for some of you who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur is that all of my customers were people who I used to work with. They'd all gone off and become heads of strategy or heads of clinical trials at pharmaceutical companies. So from a sales perspective, it was amazingly easy. You know, call up your friends, say, here's this new company I'm doing. You guys need me to do this. They would say, yes, I trust you. I love you. Great. Let's do it. And so, you know, when you're thinking about entrepreneurship, the link to what experience you have and what your network is in starting that company and how that's going to tie to potential customers is massively important. I then left that, and I didn't leave it completely. My business partner moved here from Frankfurt, and she ended up marrying a guy that I introduced her to, and they live in South Johnson County, and she's still running the company. But I joined the Kaufman Foundation because they were interested in doing a do-over at the time, which meant how can we globally help economic growth and innovation. And so it was amazingly fun. That's a whole nother story I won't even go into, but it was amazingly fun. And at the time, I worked there for 10 years, gave away a lot of money, did a lot of super impactful things that were tied to ecosystems and entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, I thought you shouldn't give away money for too long in your life, or it corrupts your brain in some way. And so I went back to something that I started with, and my best friend still was a consultant in San Francisco. She'd cashed out of 3 companies that she started, and she was essentially doing organizational design consulting for giant companies. And our very first customer was Barclays out of London. And so we just were having the best time ever. Kind of working whenever we wanted, and spending time with executive leadership in giant companies who were trying to reinvent themselves. And it was at this moment, I'd known Brad Feld for a long time via my Kaufman Foundation work, and Brad is the founder of Techstars. But it was actually through this lens that I got involved with Techstars, because Barclays in London was through the we want to reinvent ourselves. They were starting to talk about things like blockchain and other stuff that people talk about today, but this was quite a while ago, and trying to figure out how do they go faster to reinvent themselves. And met the guys at Techstars and decided to be the first corporate partner of Techstars. And we ended up implementing a Barclays London, Barclays New York, and Barclays South Africa, which I, of course, did because I spent a lot of time in South Africa. And so it was a great experience of kind of reliving what I did in the early days. And because I really loved the opportunity more of working with entrepreneurs than I loved the opportunity of working with CEOs, I decided to, when I got the call saying we want to do Techstars in Kansas City and we'll do it if you'll run it, I said, okay, I'm in. So let me talk to you a little bit about what Techstars is and what, and I'll then be very specific as it relates to Kansas City. Techstars is, I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but we call ourselves a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. And what that means is network theory and practice is unbelievably important to our business. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to scale a company, your ability to figure out the network of from a sales perspective, your sales strategy, a network relative to how are you going to attract and retain the best people, a network of investors, all of those things are critical to life or death of your early stage company. Techstars was started in 2007 in Boulder, Colorado, and it was started because there were two entrepreneurs who were CEOs of companies, but they had that they were cashing out of, and they were in Boulder, which back in 2007 there wasn't a lot of technology companies in Boulder, Colorado. It was still a cool ski town with some companies that were starting at the time, but the founders went to Brad Feld, who was a longtime venture capitalist, who happened to just want to live in Boulder and could because he wanted to, went to him and said, hey, we're all engineers here. Why don't we figure out as engineers a better way that we can start up and grow early companies? Meaning, what if we just collect lots of data on companies and try to understand what works and what doesn't work and do that? And you know, as the story goes, David and David, who are the founders, met with Brad, said, hey, I want to do this. He said, I invest in companies. Okay. Gave them some money to start the company, and they kind of went into the first year blindly, not necessarily knowing what they were doing other than the fact that they both had started and sold companies. And since 2007 to today, we've invested in 2,000 companies. And spend a lot of time building our networks around all of the things that I just talked to you guys about. We have 50 accelerator programs, and just to put this into context, in the early days, they went super slow. It was Boulder, then Boston, then Seattle, and the intention in the beginning was we're never going to do this in San Francisco, and we're not going to do it in San Francisco because Y Combinator and Techstars, which are both accelerators, started at almost the exact same time, one in San Francisco, the other one in Boulder. And so it was like, if we're really going to make a difference and build these networks, we don't need to do it in San Francisco. Those guys are already doing it. So let's only do this in places where we think entrepreneurship can scale. And so in the early days, it was all funded by Techstars, meaning they would start a program first in Boulder, then second in Boston. And Techstars would raise money from local, potentially VCs or high net worth individuals. And Techstars would fund half of it. The local VCs would fund the other half of it. And the growth essentially for the first 3 or 4 years happened that way. Then they stumbled into Barclays when I was on the Barclays side, who said to them, we want to work with you to co-invest in a whole bunch of early stage companies. We're going to tell you, here's what we're interested in. So we're a bank. We need to reinvent ourselves. We know the whole idea of deposits and things like that are going to go by the wayside at some point. And so we're going to tell you what our 5 biggest problems are. And then you guys at Techstars go off and, hire a team here. You go off and find those kinds of companies. And so that was the first corporate program that Techstars did. And today, I think 3/4 of Techstars programs around the world are corporate programs. Very few are programs like Boulder, Austin, Seattle, Boston, and Kansas City, who now are fully funded by Techstars, nobody else, which the incentive alignment from Techstars is we want to fund companies fully ourselves, and then we want to get that, we want to benefit from their exit later in life. In the corporate programs, they don't get it all because corporations fund a big piece of it. But the growth from, I think the first year that Alex and I started doing Techstars here in Kansas City, which was 4 years ago, there was maybe 26 Techstars programs around the world. And so going from 26 to 50 is a pretty giant number. We have 88 corporate partners. Some programs have multiple corporate partners. The music program in LA has more corporate programs than any other program. It's all the people you would imagine, from Pandora to Spotify to Sony to et cetera, all getting together and saying, we're afraid we're going to miss out on the next big opportunity that could change our company. And so we all want to co-invest in this. And in some cases, it's an individual. Barclays is still a customer and a corporate partner of Techstars in New York and London. We've invested in over 2,000 companies. 165 of those companies have exited. And by exited, I mean either they sold to someone else. Well, I guess that's pretty much almost, or they went public. We've had a couple of companies that have gone public that we invested in the early days. Probably ClassPass is a Techstars company that's done really well. SendGrid went public. A company that probably was our biggest exit because of the shortest cycle time is a company out of Boston called PillPack that in 5 years sold to Amazon for $1 billion. And that's a pretty short cycle time, especially in the healthcare space. And the market cap of our companies in our portfolio is $25 billion. We have thousands. Every program of Techstars has mentors associated with it. We believe that we can create a program that is awesome based upon continuously looking at what works and what doesn't and what is changing in the marketplace, but that our mentors are actually the secret sauce. And so in cases like Kansas City, about 50% of our mentors are from Kansas City, and about 50% of them are flown in from somewhere else. Most of them are CEOs or executives that have a very specific expertise. One of Alex and I's favorite mentors is Beth Ellen McClendon, who was the head of product at Google, but actually lives in Lawrence, Kansas. And so they don't have to be a CEO. Sometimes people have just such great, very, very specific expertise. Nick Bowden, who's the CEO and founder of Replica, is a person that teaches pricing for me because he teaches it at Google in San Francisco, and he's awesome at helping people develop pricing models. So our mentors are the secret sauce, and every program has them around the world. We track them. And so myself, if I have a company that's looking for XYZ expertise, all I have to do is put it on the Slack channel with all of my colleagues. I need somebody that has expertise in XYZ. And immediately I have a response from other people around the world that says, you need to talk to so-and-so who's a mentor in my program. So we call ourselves, you guys can't see this, sorry, but we call ourselves a mentor-driven accelerator because of the fact that we think our mentors are so important in the process. Mentors have helped. We were talking in the class before this about, do companies actually pivot in a big way, change what their focus is in a big way within the program? And do mentors help them to do that? And I was giving the example of two women founders that were in a program with Alex and I that came in with a company that we actually loved, that had application to a university. And within 3 weeks of the program and feedback from lots of people who knew the space, they realized they were never going to be able to scale that company. So they completely shut it down, and not legally because we invested in it, but essentially, and spent the next 3 days talking to a whole bunch of mentors and brainstorming and doing customer discovery, and created a brand new company. And by the end of the program, they had a customer. They'd implemented in that customer's, the customer was University of Missouri St. Joe, and had saved their customer $1 million. And that happened in 4 months, essentially. And then they raised money after the program, and they're amazing. And the CEO is 23. So, not bad. So yes, it happens, and that's why the mentors are so important. We couldn't do all of that just ourselves. The other thing that we have within Techstars, has anybody heard of Startup Weekend? Oh, I'm so sad. Okay. So I'm mostly sad because when I was at the Kauffman Foundation, we were the funders of Startup Weekend, creating it and scaling it. That was an $800,000 check that we wrote. And it's amazing. Startup Weekend has been around since 2010. We ran a Startup Weekend in Cairo, Egypt, the weekend of the overthrow of the government. We've run Startup Weekends in every developing economy in the world. And we've run, I think, something like 80,000 or 90,000 Startup Weekends happened last year. We've had very few in Kansas City. And I think it's simply because it's a lot of work for somebody to get one going. And the people who used to do it are tired, and CEOs of companies. But if anybody wants to run a Startup Weekend, tell me, and I'll hook you up with the right people. And Techstars actually bought Startup Weekend. And the reason that they bought it is because we actually believe the importance of giving people the experiential opportunity over a weekend of trying to start a company and getting customer feedback and then doing a competition all within 3 days is a great experience that can lead you to figure out, do I want to go to work for a startup, or do I want to potentially be an entrepreneur? It's a great experience. And so we bought it, we fund it, we don't make any money on it, but we think it's really, really important to the world. And as I mentioned, we also have our corporate innovation arm. We're located all over the world. This map is old. It's not right anymore at all. We have a program in Korea. We have a program in Singapore focused on technology for ports, as in like ships. We have programs all over the world. And here's what it looks like. This is what's going to be happening right here in this building starting on June 1. Is the first month of the program. I tell entrepreneurs, this is your mini Hell Week month. It's super hard. The first month is hard, and most of the companies that we invest in, and our applications are open right now. We invest in 10 companies. So 10 companies from wherever in the world will descend on this building on June 1. And some of those companies have revenue and have, 10 employees. Some of those companies are, 2 people and a prototype. There's a lot of variables that go into that, but the first month of the program is extremely difficult. And what we try to do in the first month is essentially tear the company apart and put it back together again, is the best way to put it. And so we do everything from helping them define their revenue model, helping them define their pricing model, helping them put together strategic partnerships, or even understanding what those are and what they need to look like, building their sales pipeline, et cetera. And then month 2 and 3 are essentially execution. Part of the bringing in mentors is to give them feedback. Part of the bringing in mentors is to give them a network toward their customers. And so if you look at Techstars Kansas City website right this moment, you're going to see a whole bunch of pictures of mentors. But as we get closer to selecting our companies, some of those will change because we need very specific mentors tied to specific expertise in companies. And so months 2 and 3 are all about execution. A typical week in a Techstars program is you're spending more time with me than you want. And or used to spend more time with Alex than you wanted. We essentially help companies figure out what their metrics need to be. They have to report to each other on their metrics every single week. They're meeting with mentors every single week. They define who their lead mentors are during Mentor Madness, and then they stay with them over the next 2 months of the program. And we're doing essentially trying to help them figure out who their first hires are. I help interview companies. We help them understand that the first 10 people that you hire are going to kill your company, so you better do it right. And obviously, we spend a lot of time teaching them how to talk about their company. And that sounds ridiculous that we have to do that. But I can tell you, I'm interviewing companies like every 30 minutes all day long now. And I spent 30 minutes with a guy today that's in the second year of his company. He's probably 40 years old, super, super, super experienced, very, very technical. And we got to minute 20, and I still had no idea what he was doing. I said, just fill out an application. I don't understand. And so it's not about being smart or not being smart. It's about getting to the point that you can actually talk simply about the problem that you're solving and your market. And the simply is the hard part because people get buried in what they're doing. And we frequently get the question of what are we looking for? And I wish I could tell you, but it's more about the team and the founders than it is about the company. As I mentioned earlier, we're not running a corporate program, and so I'm not looking for certain kinds of companies. I know what I don't want, and frankly, because I'm in Kansas City, I'm super interested in companies where I know we have a great deal of expertise. If anybody knows of an early-stage animal health company, I'm interested. If anybody knows of an early-stage digital health company, I'm interested. If anybody knows of an early-stage GovTech company, does anybody know what GovTech means? Go. What does it mean?
It's a company that has to deal with the government and paying for their services.
Okay. Okay. You also had an answer?
Companies like Pay It?
Yes, exactly. So there's like 3 examples of GovTech companies in Kansas City. When I was at the Kauffman Foundation, I funded an organization called Code for America in San Francisco that started this whole GovTech space. And there's 3 perfect examples of GovTech companies in Kansas City that are awesome. One of them is called Pay It, that just raised $100 million. That when I met John, he said, I'm just so frustrated about going to the DMV and getting my license. It's just such a horrible experience. Thus, now that's pretty much what Pay It looks like. Doppler is a company that Alex and I invested in that is in the water space. And what John wanted to do, he worked at Black & Veatch in the water department, and what he wanted to solve for is most water departments, whether it's a sewer or any other kind of a water department, most of them do not collect data on where problems are located and therefore have no longitudinal data whatsoever about the fact that at 16th and Wyandotte, everybody has a water problem and there's huge leakages all the time, which is why finally the road fell in. And so he's trying to solve that problem. The third one is the newest one and the most interesting company in Kansas City that no one knows about. It's called Replica, and Replica is a spin-out of Alphabet. Nick's, and this is Nick's second company, and his first one went through the Code for America Accelerator, which is how I met him in the first place. Nick is a urban planner by training, and Replica's focus is understanding traffic patterns. And that's, is this on? Just go off. And that's I can talk really long. That's everything from right out here on the corner, being able to understand how many person traffic as it relates to walking. Oh, okay, perfect. Yes, I can do that. Me in the orange box. That's such a great picture. Please, someone take my picture. The block orange box. Oh, rats. I'll get it back. But Replica's goal is tracking traffic patterns at a super granular level, both walking, bicycling, cars, where did they come from, where are they going, at the level of a city, so that people could actually, I mean, if you think about it, the subway system called the L in Chicago, if I remember right, was designed in 1940 or something. And it was based upon the traffic patterns at that point in time. And then you're stuck with these subway systems for all those periods of time. And so the goal with Replica is working with cities to figure out what their traffic patterns are and figure out how to redesign your roads, your walking patterns, et cetera. So 3 great examples of GovTech companies, so I love them. But other than that, it's just essentially good founders. And good founders, I know it when I see it. I can't describe it. It's usually somebody who, as I gave you the example before, when I started a company in a space that I knew really, really, really well, and I knew who all the customers were. And so I would have funded me if I needed to raise money. And that's what I'm looking for. My first question to founders is, what were you doing before you started this that made you want to start this? And I want to understand that line, because if this is just like a random, I'm really good at coding and blah, 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 and that's why I started this, because I think I can become rich and raise money. I know when things get hard, you're going to bail on me. And so I need to know that people are doing something for a very specific reason. I'm also interested, and the reason it says team, 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 is I'm really interested, if it's more than one person, was that CEO actually able to attract talent to come to work for them? If it was their high school best friend, I'm not so impressed. That's not attracting talent. That's going to the next closest person. And frankly, I'm also interested if that person has made any effort to build a diverse team. We know for sure from our data at Techstars that the more diverse teams are, the more successful they are. And so if I can find founders, and I say this, and I know I'm shocking everyone when I do it, if I can find founders that are not white men, I'm interested. I mean, I can stand here on this stage and say, I don't want to fund white men. I for sure probably will end up funding one. But I'm super, super interested because the data are clear in funding diverse teams. Obviously, the market is important. So I can't fund a company that's not scalable. It's okay if it's super niche. I was talking to somebody earlier over at Crow's Coffee that has developed a technology company doing something in what Alex and I used to call really boring spaces. I really love boring things. And I like boring because it means probably no one else is paying any attention to it. And they're solving a really old problem that there's a whole bunch of customers. And if it's in a super narrow niche, that's even more interesting because then they can go deep before they go wide. So the market is important. And obviously, as much, what I try to do is I've been meeting with companies since December, is start meeting with companies and then follow their progress. Have them send me updates. I want to know how they're progressing. Very, very, very seldom maybe other people will, but very seldom will I fund a company that is an idea that doesn't have customers. I mean, I really need to see customers. I have done it, and it's worked well one time. The company is Bellwether here in Kansas City, which is a machine learning company, long story. And Matt didn't have any customers yet, but Matt is magic. And so that was super obvious to me, and that's why I funded it. But that does not happen very often. And obviously, I care about what is the space. I'm not interested. I really like things that are impactful on the community or impactful on the world. Yeah, and I already talked about this. So I don't care what the stage is. If, it would be crazy to fund a company that's been around for 10 years. That doesn't happen. So it's usually a company that's from, 0 to 3 years old. It would have to be a big thing to fund if it's a tech company and does not have a CTO, there has to be some super big reason why we would fund it, because outsourcing the tech might work for a moment, but it's not going to work for very long. And so if the founder and CEO is not technical, hopefully they have brought a technical person on board. So why do we do this? So we do this to make money. We're not all in it for the goodness of the world. We're in it to make money. And so we are an investor in every company that, obviously, that we select. And we're on their on their cap table, and we're on it forever. And so I tell founders, you think you're signing up for a 3-month program, but you're stuck with me for a really long time. And so that's why the founders themselves are really important. I mean, I don't want to hang with people I don't like. And so, we're investing for the long haul. The reason we structure it this way and always have, and we don't make exceptions, is we want to be incentively aligned for you to be successful long term. So our goal is for you to be either become public in 10 years, sell your company to a big company, or scale it, and maybe it's going to take longer. I don't care if companies are going to raise money or not. It doesn't matter to me. If you can scale this company without raising outside money, awesome. I own 6% of a company that nobody else is going to own anything of. So when you sell it, it'll be even better. We offer founders equity back. We're the only accelerator that does that. What that means is if you don't have a great experience through our program, you can get your equity back. We don't question it. It is what it is. I don't really know how many times it's happened, but I know it's happened. And usually it's for some weird reason. We also work with lots of big companies to provide perks to our companies, meaning free stuff for as long as possible, whether that be HubSpot or SendGrid or others. So relative to this program, applications are open now. It says on my website that it closes sometime in early March. That's kind of not true. I don't want anyone to tell anyone that. We really want to get applications in, but if I suddenly meet a founder on the 10th of March that I completely fall in love with, I'm not going to tell them that they can't apply. Essentially, applications are open until we do selection, which is our final, the process is people fill out applications. A lot of times I'm just talking to people who send me a note and say, hey, I just want to talk to you to see if I should apply. So that's why I do every 30 minutes all day long. Hopefully, if I'm interested in them and they're interested in me, they apply. And I continue to follow their progress over time. And by about the middle of April, we do final interviews with top 20 companies. We have a whole bunch of people that helps us do diligence on the companies along the way, including some people here. And then we have a giant legal team at Techstars, which does a massive amount of diligence, so that we make sure that we don't ever invest in a company and are surprised later is one reason. Reason two is we want all of our companies to be ready if they want to raise money, to raise money. That means you got to be set up as a C Corp. It means if you have IP, we need to make sure it's secured. We want to know every single person that's on your cap table, stuff like that. If you're a criminal, as long as you've told me, I don't care. If you don't tell me and I find out later, I'm probably not going to take you. And those are kinds of reasons sometimes where things go wrong. Program starts, as I said, June 1. We'll be here. We're actually doing a retreat the day before June 1. And demo day is August 27th. We're hopefully going to run an amazing conference down at the new Lowe's Hotel on August 27th, along with our demo day. And then companies that are here, obviously, I keep meeting with. Companies that leave keep meeting with me anyway, but they're doing it remotely. We call Techstars for life for a reason. We have a secret sauce at Techstars, which is the back end of our company, the technology back end. It's called Connect. That's obviously going through this massive upgrade right now. And the best way to explain Connect, does anybody know what Reddit is? Do you know what LinkedIn is? Okay, so Connect is like Reddit meets LinkedIn, marries LinkedIn. And what that means is we want to make sure all 2,000 of our founders and beyond all get to know each other over time and get to use Connect as a problem-solving tool. So the best way our network works is if you're going to go try to get a partnership with, I don't care, I'm not going to say Amazon, someone else. If you're going to go get a partnership with Garmin, that you can immediately get on Connect and go to strategic partnerships page on our Reddit and find out who else has ever done a strategic partnership with Garmin. And call up those people because everybody's email address is on there and have a conversation with them and make sure before you end up going into that meeting with Garmin that you know all of the ins and outs of what works and what doesn't work with them. There's also, especially for people who are CTOs, it's probably the best resource in the world for them to solve problems. Has anybody ever dealt with this with React and when they're trying to do APIs with LinkedIn and who knows how to do that? And it's like immediate responses from people around the world. So it's a secret sauce. But it's important, and that's how you keep connected forever. They help each other raise money, they help each other with introductions, etc. We host second Thursday events in Kansas City for all of our Techstars founders and their teams. And in many cities across the country or across the globe where we operate, there are also second Thursdays. So if Matt Moody from Bellwether is going to LA next week, he knows he can immediately go online and figure out who's organizing second Thursday in LA and go and meet every Techstars founder that's in LA. So again, the common element in all of this is network theory, making sure that you're always, always, always managing your network to scale. And the other, obviously, secret sauce is all of our corporate partners. I mean, our corporate partners come to us all the time and say, hey, we have an interest. Actually, EdSites, the company I was talking about that reinvented themselves, I got an email from someone who's working with our corporate partners the other day that said, hey, Lesa, do you have anybody in your portfolio that's focused on universities and retention? Because we have this big giant finance company that wants to help students get out of bad loans. And I introduced him to EdSites, and they immediately called up Claudia and Carolina in New York City. So apply, tell people about us. We'll host events every once in a while, especially because we're going to be here. We'll have founders that come in and do founder stories. And so there will be times that we'll open up events and say students that are participants in the UMKC community can participate. I haven't figured out how we'll do that, but Alex and I will figure it out. And so that's it. So ask me questions. And I can throw you the orange ball. Okay, so who's got questions? Please, just because I want to throw this. Okay, I'm going to try. No, I want to. Are you afraid? Are you afraid? Are you afraid?
Okay, good. Okay, so with questions, because like from the beginning to right now, you always mention about like networking. So networking is a main key, right? And so you say like how you managing the network skill. So that's my question.
So what? I'm sorry. What's the question?
So you say like, so you say about like the network is a main key for running entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. And you say like, what's the? I'm wondering like, what's the best way to do it?
Oh, what's the best way to manage your network? It kind of depends on what you're interested in doing. I mean, you know, frankly, when you're a student, you should be, if you're interested in, I don't know, if you're interested in network theory and that's what you're studying, then you should be finding, all you have to do is go to Alex and ask Alex, who are the 3 most important people in Kansas City tied to network theory? And she knows the answer to that question, and then you should call them up. That's it. That one's easy. But if you are interested in robotics, you should essentially do the same thing. It starts with, you know, go find the guys at, I'm trying to remember the guy's name that runs the makerspace, the hacking space. The guys at Makers Village also do some robotic stuff. There's some car robotic stuff here that are in town, obviously Garmin. So you need to figure out what is the one space that you're interested in and who essentially is the most critical people that are in that space across the community. Don't just think it's corporate people. Okay. Because there's like usually seriously cool hackers that are behind some of this stuff that do it on the side that know everybody. I mean, if robotics was your answer, you should meet Luis, who is at Ultimaker. I'm just using it as an example. Luis works for Ultimaker in Europe, but he lives in Kansas City. And Ultimaker's a big 3D printer company. I mean, he's like the guy in Kansas City for that topic. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah, connection.
So it's
Yeah,
like
makes
figure out what your space is. Okay, you got to give me that orange thing back.
Okay. I hope you can catch it.
I really just want Alex to take my picture. So who else has questions? Come on, guys and girls. Okay, yes, really far. Okay, are you scared? It's okay. You won't break.
Hello. Can you explain?
Hold it up closer.
Okay. Can you explain more about what the startup weekend is? Like, is it just like workshops?
No.
Okay.
No. Startup Weekend is completely an experiential opportunity, which means when we run a Startup Weekend, we open applications for like 10 developers, 10 people that maybe have design experience, and 10 people that are business. And I'm just using that as an example because sometimes there are 100 people coming to a Startup Weekend, but you have to at least have that many people. And people show up at a Startup Weekend on a Friday, usually about 6 o'clock. Everybody eats and meets each other. And then whoever has ideas gets up in a line and stands up in front of the room and pitches their idea. And so usually it's, here's a problem that I want to solve. And it could be like a community problem. It could be anything. Here's a problem that I want to solve. And then we put them all on the board. And everybody that's there goes in and votes with stickies. And you end up with maybe 5, depending upon the size of the group, you end up with maybe 5 ideas that people want to focus on, and everybody self-selects into one of those teams. And you now we have mentors that are there that kind of guide you, but you spend the rest of the weekend trying to come up with a solution to solve the problem that you chose to solve for the weekend. And on Sunday afternoon, I mean, we have people that come in and mentor, and I mean, you're calling customers and saying, here's what we're doing. Are you interested? What would you pay for this? Hopefully you've got tech people there that are doing wireframes, so you're creating a little mini MVP. And then on Sunday afternoon, we bring judges in that usually are entrepreneurs. And each team comes in and pitches, and they pick winners. And it's that simple.
If you have another question, please raise your hand. Do you have one? Okay. Just go right here.
Okay.
You next.
Do you deal with like all kinds of companies, like for-profit, nonprofit? Okay.
No, we're making money. I mean, yes for Startup Weekend, no for me at Techstars. No, we're a for-profit company, and so the only not-for-profit that Techstars has ever done was an exception funded by Brad Feld in Boulder, Colorado, and it was called the Global EIR program, something that I wish we had at UMKC. Sorry, Alex is laughing because Global EIR program has figured out a workaround to get a visa in the United States if you're an entrepreneur. So look it up. But that's the only time we've ever done it. Other than that, it's all for-profit.
You mentioned that if you're not a good fit for the problem you're trying to solve, that when things get hard, you're either going to give up or rise to the occasion. Can you give an anecdote from your career where someone either rose to the occasion or gave up on the problem they were trying to solve?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm trying to think of examples that I can tell. Pardon? Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, we had a company that we invested in the first year that were absolutely the smartest engineers I've ever met. And through the process, they had an unbelievably hard time taking feedback, as in pretty much wouldn't listen to feedback. And they tried to go ahead and raise money. They tried to close customers. They tried to do a whole bunch of different things and had a great team and a great product, but really, really needed to take better direction, and they didn't, and they kind of crashed and burned. I have another phenomenal example of a company I love that is come back to life from the ashes in Wichita, Kansas. I hope Chris doesn't mind I'm talking about him. So it's a company founded by a young man whose family was in the construction business. And he's done a talk about this before, so I'm not telling anything secret. But Chris started the company. It's called Grit, G-R-I-T. So you would think he would have lots of grit. And two things I think happened, and I'm simplifying this so unbelievably greatly. He overbuilt, he raised too much money, so he was allowed to overbuild his technology and overbuild it in a way that customers actually were scared of it and didn't want it. And he ended up running out of money. He had all sorts of things that happened to him that are like the craziest things I've ever heard. His company was essentially killed by a investor who promised to lead his round and drug him along for a long period of time. And it was a strategic investor outside of the country who, at the very last minute, decided that they were closing down their venture fund and they weren't going to run it. It was a corporation, that they were no longer going to do VC. And everybody else that was going to invest freaked out and thought for sure it was really something about him and his company. And he ran out of money. And he went back to work for a company and had to lay off an entire team, which was pretty big, and went to work for a company kind of close to his space who allowed him to do extra work on the side to keep it going. And he's just now brought it back out of the ashes and has gone back full time. And so sometimes Timing, bad investors are a really big problem that people don't understand. The number of companies that I've seen in Kansas City that have taken angel deals, early stage investment from people who took way too much of their company is ridiculous and could kill you later. And so there's all sorts of weird and little things that could happen that we, frankly, at Techstars try to keep them from having those things happen to our companies. But sometimes circumstances, either people aren't coachable or the company's too early. I mean, there's multiple companies that are too early and the market's just not ready for them. And if they just kind of go sit it out for a little while, which is, I think, in Chris's case, he's taken a lot of the VR, AR stuff that he built off of the product and built a product now that the customers want. Hope that answered your question.
I can do one more quick question. Do you want to throw the last one? I'll let you do that.
I totally want to throw this. Are you ready?
All right, sweet.
This should be a test for Techstars.
So I think you mentioned that the companies that you actually sponsor are companies that know how they're going to make money with what they're doing. What if a company has a good idea that it's working, but they don't quite know how to make money out of it? Do you have resources that would help them figure that out, or do you guys still take them in?
Yeah, I mean, that's half the time we are taking companies that maybe have a little bit, have sold some, but they really haven't figured out their market. They really haven't figured out their pricing. They really haven't figured out a whole bunch of stuff. But that's what we focus on. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I'm actually interested in. I have a company I invested in this last year that already had about 10K of monthly recurring revenue, and she totally knew her business, but just really didn't know how to scale it. Really didn't know how to build a product roadmap. And so I met her and looked at this company and looked at the marketplace, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally do this. And she raised $2 million a month out of demo day, and she's doing great. That doesn't happen that often. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, Lesa. Is this working? If you have some extra questions, you can come up and ask Lesa. The fact that Techstars is coming to UMKC this summer is such a big deal and such a big opportunity for UMKC, and I think that there's going to be a lot of great resources and opportunities that come with that, so it should not be understated that that's going to be a really special and unique thing that we have here. So hopefully you'll get to be a part of some of those things and come to some of those events. And Lisa's hiring 10 interns. So I think for now you're supposed to reach out to me if you want to send in your resume, and I'll sort of filter them to her. But yeah, thank you so much.